What's up family, it's Wilson, also known as Designed by Will, and in today's video we're going to be designing a women's streetwear collection in 3 hours, part 2, graphic design and colors. I want you to go ahead and fire up Photoshop. Now the garment that I'm designing requires the basic layout for all my t-shirts and all my references. I don't tend to make the resolutions way too high, but I keep them at a very steady, balance. So that's basically 2450 in width by 2700, and I'm working with artboards 300 DPI, and I'm working in RGB. The first artboard I usually use for referencing, and the second one is where I start planning and designing. For this design, it's all going to be hand drawn, so I'm going to start off by introducing a grid and start just freehanding all these flames and sort of look, and then we're going to add in the typography. I can't really teach this because I'm drawing, so I don't know, if you don't know how to draw, this might be a little bit difficult, but to make your life a little bit easier, ensure you have a drawing tablet because you don't want to break your wrist. After getting the foundation of our lining all fire, we headed out to make some custom type that's referencing that classic, I would say, Arabic font, but we're not lame people, so we're going to make it completely from scratch. And I'm just using a thick rectangular brush to sort of create these thick lines that we can go ahead and outline and finalize in. Just by using a black outliner brush sized at 5 or 4, we can go ahead and finalize everything. Ideally, you want to create a new layer where you can add in the black outline. This is going to distinguish where you have your draft and where you have your final copy in case you need to go back and make any edits. One reason why you also do this is because if you draw it all on the same layer and you rub something out or make an adjustment or even fill something in, you can't really do that without disturbing the rest of all the drafts. So just keep that in mind. Same also applies for the flames, but since we have the flames already in there and we only drew one side, we can go ahead and use the symmetry tool in Photoshop, which is the little butterfly brush just at the top at the end of all the settings and adjustment, and you can go ahead and trace what your draft is and it will create a perfect duplicate on the other side without having to think about how you're going to make this look perfect and symmetrical. From here, I usually just go in with the paint bucket tool and fill in all the shapes, and I double click them to make sure that the threshold is high enough to fill in the full subject. After we have the rest of the design complete, we can go ahead and turn off our grid and make a duplicate, right click and head over into blending options. Now I'm going to show you guys how to get this really cool smoky tattoo looking effect, or vintage tribal tattoo effect, and I'm going to put up the screenshot of all the styles that I'm doing to this because I feel like it's a lot easier for you to follow rather than me just talk your head off. So to get the effect, the distance is on 13, 10 and 24. That's for the inner shadow. The contour looks something like this, which is just the ring double, which gives it that weird inner shadow glow. For the inner glow, opacity is on 100, noise is on 20, choke on 0, size on 24, range on 50. Pause the settings to make sure you have everything correct, and the contour is just on linear, the first one, which is the normal. Once you have your graphics complete, I want you to grab a screenshot of them in Photoshop and drag them into Illustrator. From here, we're going to be using the image trace tool to turn these into vectors. Simply go to image trace, preview, ignore white, and put the paths all the way up to 100, and I want you to drop the corners down all the way to 0, which is going to make the dots look a little bit more round. Turn up the threshold if you have to, if not, keep it as is. If it is a little bit too graphic intensive for your computer, just turn down the paths and you should be fine. Now you're going to want to grab a clean version of your typography without any effects on there and scale it to the same width or size as the one with all the effects / grunge. Now we're going to be making an offset with this. We can't really do it with the original grunge that we have because there's a lot of vectors and a lot of paths which might eat up your RAM and cause your Illustrator to slow down. Once you've got that nice and centered, head over to object, path, offset path, and from here you just want to set it from meter to round so it's nice and smooth. Set this to around 3 to 10 and press OK once you've seen it in preview. Now you can go ahead and play with the colors for your design and play with the placements. Now I'm just going to open color books for later on when we color everything. So just go to the fill, color books, and Pantone plus CMYK uncoded and drag it to the side of your Illustrator window, which will open up all these beautiful color options. From here you can go around and play with different colors as you fit to see how it looks with your design. I just simply went with the classic almost navy blue. From here I'm going to duplicate our flames because we only screenshotted one side, and we can align it perfectly with the other side by selecting both of them and using the alignment tools. Now you can see that the design has fully come together. You can go ahead and play with colors, placements, and size to make everything look nicer. So basically I've mixed design reference 1 and design reference 2 to come up with this look, and I really like it. And it suits that whole, I guess, Y2K 2000 sort of look, but it has my own grunge twist slash element to it. Now that we have our designs, I'm going to quickly show you guys how I color the technicals. And no, it's not using the shape builder tool. It's going to be called the live paint tool. And now to get that tool, all you have to do is hold the shape builder tool and go to live paint. And from here, you can select any color that you want with your graphic. And since we already had some of our colors lined up to the left of us with our Pantones, I'm going to go ahead and select the second last color, which is a sort of dark black, which I usually indicate black with all my technicals, because if I select solid black, it gets rid of the lines. And then I'm going ahead here and I'm coloring in all the different sections. Now, one thing to note about the live paint tool is that you have to use the live paint selection tool in order to change colors, unless you expand the object. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and color the rest of this technical. Like I said before, you won't be able to select and change the color with the normal selection tool or direct selection tool. You're going to have to use the live paint selection tool, which you just hold the live paint tool and you'll grab the selection tool at the very bottom of that list. From there, you can select any color you want and go ahead and change the color of that graphic. But you can also just paint over it again with the live selection paint tool like I just did, or press Command Z to go back if you make a mistake. To make the design a bit more feminine, I made the flames pink, and I also just played with different placements. I made a small version for the chest at the front and also a large version for the bottom right of the t-shirt to indicate a tramp stamp. Now, if you don't know what a tramp stamp is, these things were very popular within the early 2000s / late 90s, and I'm playing homage to those designs because that's the era which I want to put my client or customer in. Just keeping the design very consistent, I'm going to go ahead and add in a cream fill for the middle and have a very high contrast color on the outside, like an orange, green, or purple or black, which will really show off those body lines when it comes to production. For the accent color, I'm going with a pink, which will also match the graphic. So we're keeping that 3 to 5 color palette, especially when you go to print. A lot of colors means a higher price point. So having that 3 to 5 color palette keeps you in the safe bottom range when it comes to production. Now, what if you hate the whole color scheme and you want to go with something more crazy? I'm going to show you guys a really cool tool called the Recolor tool in Illustrator, and it's very simple to use. From here, I want you to grab a duplicate of all your designs, just dragging down, holding Option, and then from here I want you to expand all your designs so you can go ahead and edit the live paint without having to use the live paint selection tool. That's why I'm expanding everything. Once that's expanded, I want you to select all your graphics or all your layers and go to help and type in recolor, or go to edit and then edit colors, and it's at the top, which you can edit the colors with. Now from here you can go ahead and play with this color picker, this automated color picker. Now the one thing I don't like about this automated color picker tool is that you can't directly select the colors that you need. I use this just to give me a little bit of more ideas, because we usually go with the classic black, red, green and purples, which are very safe. But if you want something more out there when it comes to your graphic, I would select this and go ham and just play with the different options. You can't go in and fine tweak everything, but I just wanted to show you guys this tool. Maybe I'll make a whole video on it, but it's just up to you guys and if you use it or not. It's very niche. After playing with the colors and everything, I finalized on a green version, which is the safe version, and a black version. Now we're gonna head in to design 2, which is gonna be the design for the tank top. Now, taking a look at design 2, it's just going to be some hand typography with an airbrush look, and that's going to be the whole design in itself. I'm going to show you guys the process in making custom typography through Photoshop, but also the effects that I use to get this whole airbrush looking effect. Starting off with the draft, you want to make sure you have a new layer in Photoshop on a new artboard. Make sure your smoothing is at 100%, and you're just going in with a drawing tablet and sketching in with hand typography smile on camera. Now with these airbrush designs, they're very stylized, which makes them a little bit hard to read sometimes. And for myself, I came into victim with that because you can't really read the text because the L obviously looks like an S now, but this is just the drafting so we can get the outline for the typography. So just continue until you have your whole quote typed out, or even your brand name. Once I have my graphic typed out in terms of the draft layout, I'm going to go ahead and take some screenshot of some Pinterest references, which I'm going to put on a new artboard. Now there's two ways of doing this. The first way is basically going in with a new layer and adding weight to your typography by adding a duplicate and tracing it, but making sure it's offset a little bit on certain areas just to show the weight of the graphic. Now this is very time consuming and it requires a lot of skill. If you don't understand typography, this looks a bit wonky like myself, but like I said, this is a learning curve for me as well, so I'm going through and making some weights on this typography, which I end up not using anyway. Next, you want to go to blending options, change the color to black if it's not black already. Go ahead and add an adjustment layer, which is just a threshold, and make sure everything is looking nice and sharp. Like I said before, this is the draft because we're going to go ahead and have to draw this in to give it a more soft look, but you can obviously just affect blur, Gaussian blur to make it soft if you want to keep this typography. But I'm just training myself in learning how to add weight to our type, and just go in with a paint bucket and fill in all the little offsets that we made when we redrew the type on there, and you're going to see the type really come together. The way I cut out shadows is select, color range, shadows, and press OK. I then make a new layer, get the paint bucket tool, select black and fill it in. Just because converting a threshold and an object into a smart object isn't the best way and it doesn't really do the job correctly, but since we've done it this way, we can go ahead in blending options and start playing with ways to make this look like a airbrushed effect. Now I'm going to put screenshots up of the effect again because I do a lot of experimenting while I make this design. So in the blending options, we're going to start with the inner glow. Opacity is at 100, noise is at 9, color is on fill on orange, size is on 21, and counter is on linear/normal, range is on 50. Moving on to gradient, it's on reflected, and these are the colors that I've selected in the gradient editor. And make sure your angle's on 97 and your scale is at 103 or 143, sorry. Now to add a little bit more blur to your graphic, your outer glow is going to have to be on 100%, noise at 7, spread at 2, size at 21, range at 50, and contour is still at linear basic or the first one, whichever you want to call it. From here, we're going to move into our drop shadow. So for the opacity, we're going to keep it at 100, distance on 42, spread at 34, size at 49, and quality at a 9% noise rate, which is going to give us a nice little glow or slightly haze to our drop shadow, which is going to add to our whole effect. Lastly, we're going to have another drop shadow, but this is going to be for the inside. So for the effect, we're going to keep the opacity at 100, distance is on 8, spreads on 39, and sizes on 21 with a noise rate of 5. This is going to allow us to create a nice looking effect that's not as realistic as an original or normal airbrush, but it gives us that effect because we have all those noise and stuff like that. Because when you're using an airbrush, it's not consistent. That's why we've added the noise and added in these inner glows of different colors and different shades to display the different blending modes when they're airbrushing on different colors, if that makes sense. For the background, I just added a layer underneath our typography and added in with a very soft brush some clouds, which then I used an inner glow set to a purplish orange to get that sort of cloud airbrush look, which I think is really sick. Now I'm just going in with the effect on a new layer and adding in some accents, which I'm gonna go ahead and change the colors of to pink in the gradients just to add some contrast to the design and make it a little bit more girly. I'm going to go ahead and add in a new layer, which I'm going to get a very soft brush, set it to a reasonable size, and add in some light flares and highlights on the text. Now I'm just doing this by going over very lightly on my drawing tablet, making little stars just like how we did for the background with the pink ones. Just adding it there to add more character, especially when you're looking at these airbrush effects. They did this in almost all of the references that I had, whether it was a different color or a different shade. Just having highlights there makes it look a little bit more retro. I'm going to go ahead and introduce a new layer, remove all the designs from Smile if you're on camera effect. Then I'm going to go in with a very soft brush and hand draw in the name revision, which is going to be for the back of our tank top. Then for design cohesion, I'm going to add in the background and also the little accent things with the different color, but put revision.psd, which is the full IG name for our brand, and go ahead and add in those little effects that we had before. This is why I love using blending modes or layer styles, because it allows you to continuously use them throughout your graphic or throughout your project without having to go back and edit them. If you have the Adobe Creative Cloud pack, you can go ahead and add these into your library, which you can go ahead and open in Illustrator, which you can just place onto your mockups. If not, just export them as a PNG and make sure your artboard color is set to transparent. Next, we're going to go ahead and color these graphics, which is the same steps as coloring the other one. So I'm just going to skip through this until we have our colors ready. Once you've got your design finished, go ahead and drag it into the Illustrator file, size it down holding shift so you don't distort your graphic. If you don't have the cloud or libraries for your Photoshop and Adobe products, just export the PNGs. After you got them in, make sure you flatten transparency all these images, because if you send off the Illustrator file and these are not flattened, they're going to be very distorted and warped, because they're going to be live graphics rather than flattened graphics, which can be played with locally on the Illustrator file rather than the cloud. Moving on to design 3, that's 2 designs complete, the tracksuit / cropped hoodie set. And for this design, most of it is going to be completed within Illustrator. The design is going to be focusing on patches and other different ways of production rather than classic screen print or DCG. We're going to be moving on to using patches, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a frayed patch. So just go ahead and make a weird assortment of lines in this sort of circular shape, and make sure you have everything around the same edge, because it's going to look like the design is fraying once once we got it all together. From here, you want to bring up the size just a little bit and set it to round. Make sure all the corners are rounded also, because this is going to help us make our design look a little bit more realistic. Expand the lines and then group them all together, then make them into one shape. From here, we're going to turn it into a brush. Make sure you select scatter brush, and then from here you can start playing with the settings. Rotation, set that on tilt and put that to around -80 to 98. Ideally, add your brush to the line work of your circle or logo, whatever shape it is, and if it looks a bit off, you can go ahead and play with the settings and make any final adjustments to ensure that it fits right. I always want to make the spacing a bit smaller or marginally smaller, just so the frame looks a bit more natural. There's going to be corners and sections where it looks a bit off, like towards the bottom left, but like I said before, you can play with these settings to get it how you want it. I do have a whole video showing you guys how to use this brush in Illustrator, but this is just a quick tutorial. I want you to go ahead and make a duplicate of your shape, and from here you want to set the original one with the fraying edge at the bottom and take off any line work for the one on top. From here, you want to select the frayed edge version, which you're going to edit. It might be a little tough if it's perfectly aligned, and expand appearance. From here, you want to just make it the same color, and then you can go ahead and start adding stitch lines, or where your graphic / pattern or patch is going to be attached to. To make a stitch line, go ahead and turn off your fill, go to strokes, add a size to your stroke, and select dash lines in your stroke settings. From here, you can go ahead and adjust it to see how you see fit, and if it looks right or wrong, just depending on what sort of look or sort of stitch that you're going for. I just usually sample the ones of other garments because I've spent time working on them, and I just up the size of the width. As this is going to be the main design on this garment, make it a reasonable size and go ahead and start playing with different color options. Obviously these are going to change, but I usually like to see something at its final and then go ahead and make adjustments as I see fit to the rest of the garment, which is a strange way of designing, and it also makes it hard for me to teach because you can't see the final outcome, but in my head I'm seeing the final outcome. Next, we're going to start painting the rest of the garment using live paint, and I'm just going to skip forward this part because it is quite repetitive. So we're going for an amateur look in terms of the graphic. So go ahead and grab your pencil tool and start drawing in different ways of saying I love you, but in a more amateur / cartoonish look. This adds to the effect of the sort of frayed edges throughout the whole garment, sort of like that unfinished artsy project, and that's the whole theme for this garment. To tie into this look, I'm also going to be introducing some daisies or flowers in the same sort of effect / style, and this is going to all make sense once we add the stitch pattern to the actual graphics, but nothing special here, just going through with the pencil tool on a really high stabilization, so it looks a lot more computerized than normal with your hand. I'm also viewing the graphic in wireframe mode just so I have a better understanding of my line work and I'm not messing anything up regarding the actual garment color in live paint. Once we finish our graphic, we're going to go ahead and add this sort of stroke path onto all the graphics to represent that it's meant to be embroidery. This is going to be placeholder for the I love you text, but it's going to be the final look for all the flowers, and these are the settings that I'm using. And I'm very happy with how the graphic is looking right now, but just to make it more realistic, I'm going to add some backing to this whole graphic, which I'm going to be making white, and it's going to be very, very tailored to the sort of text that we go with. And also I'm using the pencil tool yet again at a stabilization that's extremely high to get this sort of look, and we're just going to fill this in with white. And we're going to be using it as, like I said before, the backing for the graphic. Next, we're going to go ahead and add a stitch line, and to make that as accurate as possible, just go to object, path, offset path, and this time we're going to set it to -1, and that's going to create an offset inside the object. Then we're going to sample this stitch line here, and from here we can drag it off the graphic by pressing Command Y so we don't disturb the live paint. Make sure you select everything and drag it off of the garment so you can go ahead and edit it outside of the garment, which allows you to play around with the layers and which object is on front/back without disturbing the actual garment yet again. Sorry, I said garment like 10 times there, but I just can't stress this enough. Right click, arrange center back, and boom, you have a backing for your graphic, and this is perfectly fine for the effect that we're going for. You can go ahead and add the fray look or whichever sort of effect that you're going with, but you can really see it here coming together. If you don't know what backing is, usually when they do embroideries for varsity jackets and they have like chelene patches and leather patches, they often have backing as a way to support the material so it doesn't get distorted while you walk around and stuff like that, or it doesn't get distorted towards the fit of your body. To make a more personalized effect, we're going to add a chain stitch. If you don't know what chain stitch is, it's basically done by hand, and it looks like little circles or little C's going across each other rather than a machine stitch. Using the pencil tool, I want you to go ahead and make a semicircle. From here, I want you to drop down the stroke and remove the dashed line if you have the effect still applied to your stroke. And then you can go ahead and just expand this, because now we have the object that we're going to need to make this into a brush. Now to turn this into a brush, we're going to go ahead and add a new brush within the brush settings, and we're going to add a scatter brush. Now I'm just going to pop up my settings that I'm using because it's easier, because I keep adjusting these as I go. Go ahead and apply the chain stitch effect to the rest of all your letters that you've made just by simply clicking it, and bam, you have a chain stitch effect. Now it does look a little bit more wonky, but we're adding to that realism effect to display to our manufacturer, and that's basically all the effects towards this graphic. Lastly is just to play with any other effects that we want to add, or play with any other placements, and that's going to make it for this design. It's officially judgment time for our graphics, and we're going to go over which one's my favorite and which one's my least favorite, and what I would change or make any sort of adjustments later on in this future. Let's go ahead and start with this two-piece set. I do like it, but I think the top could have been a little bit more cropped, or could have went for a singlet like we did for design 2 regarding the singlet. So regarding the singlet, I love this design. I would change the placement of the front to fit the rest of the garment, but other than that, I think this is a solid summer piece and would work really well. Plus, if you sold it for a good price, it would be a good lower entry graphic. For this two-piece set, I'm absolutely in love with this two-piece set. I think it works really, really well, and it would do well if you market it towards that Y2K sort of fashion niche. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this whole little mini series, and I hope to make some of these more in the future. Even though they don't do really well, I like to display you guys with a lot of information in this spread out sort of format. I'll see you guys when I see you. I love you. Peace.